Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. I am Rusty Gaylord. I am the host and happy to have you with us today. Fork in the Road is a conversation with interesting, successful people doing interesting things in their lives and examining the forks in the road, the changes in direction, the decisions, the situations that they encountered that required a change of them and how they navigated those and how they helped them to get to where they are today. I'm super happy to have Erica Feucht with us today. Erica is an entrepreneur, has a very interesting background, and looking forward to having a great conversation with her. Her business is Pit Liquor, so we're going to have that. We'll have more information coming up on that as we get into it. So, Erica, welcome to Fork in the Road.
Thank you, Rusty. It's great to be here.
Well, why don't you just give us, because you've had such an interesting background. You spent some time in Africa, in Guinea-Bissau. You came back to the US, you were a copywriter, and now you're an entrepreneur running this business, Pit Liquor, which is fundamentally a deodorant business. And I'm like, wow, those are three different things in life. So give us a little bit of the backstory on how you got at least into your current spot and where you are today as an entrepreneur. Like, what happened to bring you there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the entrepreneurship journey was had a couple launching points. When I went to Africa, I worked there with my husband and we loved working together, but had to return home because of other forks in the road. And at that point, we sort of decided that we wanted to find a way to work together again. So we thought about business and we thought, well, if we ran a business, we'd have to do something that would be really fun and interesting to do. And that to us meant an irreverent brand, something that would move quickly, something that had a lot of momentum. And so we didn't really know what we were looking for. And my husband is he's a materials scientist. And so he thinks about the world differently and he likes to solve problems for fun. And that's not fun to me. And I had a deodorant problem and I was dealing with rashes and reactions and nothing worked. And during my pregnancy, I turned back into a regular deodorant user and it crushed him. And so he spent a year developing a product. And at the end of that process, he'd made this whiskey deodorant. Friends and family wanted it. We're giving away a lot. And we thought, gosh, maybe this is it. Maybe this is our business. And I came up with the name Pit Liquor and thought that fits a brand that'll grow quickly. But we need to see if people are actually receptive or maybe it's too weird. So we started giving away product for free on Facebook and gave away a lot of it to strangers in exchange for feedback. And then those people would find our address because they thought we were shipping from like a warehouse, but it was our home. And they would come to our house, a lot of them, and like knock on our door or wait for us to get home and like sit in the driveway and be like, when are you making more Pit Liquor? And we were like, okay. So the product's good. But we need to know, can you market it online? Because we really felt that the momentum in product was in online sales at that point. This was 2017. And so we decided to do a Kickstarter campaign because we thought, okay, looking at it's a low risk way to assess the mobility of this item. And neither of us has a marketing background. So if we can do this, what could stop us from just exploding? And the campaign was successful. I basically didn't sleep for 30 days and I had a baby at the time. I was going and like knocking on the doors of all the local newspapers and saying, hey, I've got something to leave you. And they're like, you can leave now, take it with you. And I was like, can't go unless I leave it here. Just very like kind and persistent. And I would describe that as pretty much the underpinnings of everything in this journey.
Wow. I love that. That's such a classic entrepreneur story that your address is your house and people come knocking at your house looking for more product, which is great, right? What a great sign about the quality of your product and how your customers like it. So I know that's the beginning of the journey for you guys. You mentioned in there that you just had a baby and, we were chatting before about how having kids has actually put a constraint on your business life, but in a positive way that has helped to propel you forward in ways that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have had if you had started this business 10 or 15 years ago and were just a single person. So I'd love to hear more about that because I think it's such an interesting fork in the road. Most of us think of kids as slowing you down. It's like, well, I don't have more time to put in my work. I've got to spend on family, as if that would slow down your work. But you have a different perspective on that. And I'd love to hear you share that.
Yeah, I think for a long time I've sat here and felt like, oh, I wish I had more time to give to my work because I am a mom. But we had a baby at the same time we were developing this company, and she was 9 months old when we launched the company. So she and the company kind of are siblings in a way. And now we have a second baby. And investors used to ask me, well, what's going to happen when you have the second baby? Is everything going to fall apart? And I was like, well, when we had the first one, the whole business took off. So having a second could only be good. And we grew more than 300 X that year. So I'd say having kids has proved to be good for our business. But I think a lot of that comes down to I I have a strong sense of how I want to be as a parent. And when I see myself stepping away from that in order to provide what the business wants, which I've done several times, you're like, okay, I need to give more to the business. It has to come from somewhere. It comes out of the kids. And when that starts happening, I start to see it and I go, gosh, I need to realign my priorities. And in order to do that, I have to be more efficient. And so I have to make leaps faster. I have to say, okay, this was the inflection point that caused us to hire our first employee. Was I was manufacturing product in my house, shipping it from my house, ordering everything. Like I was wearing all the hats, and my daughter was holding my leg and crying. And
Mm.
she was little, she was a toddler, and it broke my heart. And I still have tears in my eyes thinking about it. It was so hard. And I thought to myself, if this is what this is going to be like, it's not going to be worth it, because this is not why I got into business, was to listen to my daughter cry while I work. And so I need to hire somebody, because if we hire somebody and it doesn't work out, that's more in line with who I am and with what I want than continuing like this. And when we did that, the business blew up, and it grew by 8 times in the following months, which was crazy.
Mm.
Um, but I really think for us, it's been coming up, like, entrepreneurship is so scary. And there's so many points when the fear would force me to do safer things typically. But I'm more afraid of being an inadequate mom, of not doing the
Mm.
things that I feel so strongly about. And so I step directly into that fear, and it's led us into radical growth, which has been really cool.
I love what a powerful story, because it's the constraint that ultimately causes you to grow.
Yeah.
And most people will hit that constraint when they're like, working 15-hour days or something like that. Then they hit the
Mhm.
constraint. But you're just hitting that constraint earlier, and it forces you to grow, whether that's hiring the next person, delegating more, outsourcing more, but
Yes.
figuring out how do you expand your capacity. And you're also demonstrating the perfect entrepreneurial truth that the success of your company is limited by your own growth as a person and as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. And so you're forced into more growth, and therefore your company is growing faster. Such a cool story.
Yeah. It's like holding two ropes tied to two cars as they drive in opposite directions and refusing to let go, but then finding that you can expand. It's like
Mhm.
your whole entire worldview shifts, and it's not two cars. You're actually this wildly capable being.
Yes. Oh, so
Yeah.
amazing. You you mentioned one of the forks in the road that's been a little bit more recent, which is kind of reorienting your business. And
Mhm.
I think and part of this reorientation was what's number one priority? Is it growth or is it profit? And I think
Mhm.
it's such an interesting dilemma for a lot of entrepreneurs, right? I
Mhm.
live in Silicon Valley, and here clearly the orientation is toward growth, right? Growth
Yeah.
above all. Uh, and yet there are so many people out there running a business that is they're prioritizing profit. I'm curious to hear for you, was that a major decision point for you? And how did you make that decision?
It was a really painful fork in the road, honestly.
Mm.
And it is more recent. But when we launched the business, we knew from the very start that we planned to sell equity and raise investment. So we sat down with the legal team and figured out how to sort of pace ourselves so we didn't end up with no company left and things like that. So that had been our vision from before day one. We knew, like, knew we were going to sell equity. And then raising equity, I've raised investment for the past several years. I've raised quite a bit, actually. It's a lot to me. All together, I think it's close to 2 million. Some of that's debt and some of that's equity, and it's been great for propulsion of the company. But as we went through 2021, there were some massive inflection points that hit D2C companies, like the iOS 14 update. And we spent a good part of
Mm.
the year trying to assess, how serious is this? Like, how much does this impact our ability to run the way we want to? At the same time that I'm talking to investors. When you talk to investors, they want you to grow at a rate that can only be done with infusions of capital without the capital. And we have a solid profit margin. We have a strong company, but we still couldn't grow that fast without capital. So we would take bridge debt, and then the funding would kind of move or change or fall through or not work out the way we wanted. And it was just this long process of sort of recognizing different ways that funding was or was not going to work. And we came to this point. We had an investor on the line in December, and it was right before all the investors take like Christmas break. Entrepreneurs don't take Christmas break, but they do when they're working with investors because you can't talk to anyone. So they were like, I'm going on Christmas break. I need to talk to you today. It was my daughter's birthday. And I had this really solid boundary for myself. Like, I don't work on my daughter's birthday. But this investor had to talk to me, and he calls and he says, we're backing out. And, it's because we're really worried about the iOS 14 update, essentially. Like, it's affecting businesses in a big way. So I had to spend Christmas break pivoting the company and just being like, okay, we've done everything we can with investment. We could still continue to try, but we're burning money at a rate that's unsustainable. And I think that the best strength for us as a business built with a really solid profit margin, what if we relied on ourselves? We have revenue. We have a killer team. Our teams have built companies in the past. So it's not like I have to just fall back to doing everything myself, which would be a death throw. It was like, how do we restructure the internals of the company so that profitability can be the wind beneath our wings? We have a like 76% growth or profit margin on product that goes out the door, and that's with shipping costs and everything counted in. So we're solid, and we can pivot into wholesale and pivot into less risky strategies, and then really take the time to assess our growth plans and make sure that we're do one thing at a time and test it and see what's working. And then once we find what works, we can push that out across channels. And it's not this frenzied pace anymore. It's like, this seems more true to everyone here and to what we can do. And it feels like a really healthy choice.
So I'm hearing that a little bit of just you just said it right at the end. It's more true to who you are, and it's a healthy choice. And I want to make the comparison to parenting, which is like when you're parenting most parents, sorry, when they're parenting, they're not in a rush for their kid to be a grown-up. But
Right.
as you mentioned, like your company and your child are almost siblings, your first child.
Mhm.
And like in a way, you were rushing for your company to grow up. Right. And
Yes.
so I'm curious, like you said it was hard, but where do you think what did it take to be true to yourself and to make that decision that is true to yourself, to say, hey, we're not going to try to force something that doesn't feel like the right fit. We are going to go back to something that's more true to ourselves. Like, what does it take to make a decision like that?
I was working with a really good advisor at that point who was trying to help me see, like, what are my truths? How do I stand for them?
Mhm.
And it took a lot of guts, honestly,
Yeah.
because you sit there and you say, like, all of these things that I've been shooting for are someone else's way of doing this.
Mm.
And I it's like you finally see yourself in the picture as one of the people at your company, because for so much of the time I see everyone around me and I've struggled to see myself. And then I
Mhm.
saw myself and I thought, gosh, that person needs to be stood up for. And that person needs to find balance, because that person will burn out. And what matters to me. It was kind of, I sat down with Jason, my co-founder and husband, over Christmas, and we just said, like, our starting point wasn't what should the company look like? It was, what do we want? And how
Mhm.
far off the mark from what we want and what we wanted when we started this are we? And so we didn't
Mhm.
actually start by looking at the company at all. It started with a very introspective self-examination. And we said, well, if we want these things and we don't have them, and we're working this hard, what can we do to realign? And so we realigned everything around what we actually want and care about. And that was brave and really scary.
Well, yeah, and so unusual. Like most of us assume we've got a business and we align our lives to fit the business.
Yes.
And you guys just went through a process of doing it the other way. It's like, hey, what do
Mhm.
we want as
Yeah.
individuals? And let's align our business to support that. So powerful.
Yeah.
Um,
It's been
y- y-
powerful.
oh, yeah, so it's awesome. And it takes courage. Absolutely. So
It
I
does,
want to
because you're
rewind a
calling
little bit.
investors and saying, "Hey, like,
Oh,
this is actually where I wanna go, and this is who I wanna be," and they've been overwhelmingly supportive.
mm. Well, that's good because I'm glad that they are. And I wanted to rewind to this conversation with the investors because I'm curious for you as a woman raising $2 million in equity and debt. uh, Were there any unique challenges that you felt you had to overcome going through that process?
There were. I kinda wanna start from the beginning, tell you a story from the beginning and then talk about the middle of the investment
Yeah.
process. When we started looking for investment, we encountered someone who wanted to invest in our company. It was very early on, and he wanted to write us a check for 150,000, which to us was like insane money. I mean, it felt crazy. We had, I think, 80,000 in sales at that point. So he was willing to write us a check for more than a year's worth of sales, which was crazy. And we were like, okay, this is great. Like, we really need the money. We're running up against some problems. How are we going to make it work? And then we got uneasy about him. He just culturally didn't feel like a fit for us. Like, not that he's a bad person, but that the relationship wasn't going well. And for a little while, we tried to shoehorn it and be like, oh, it's okay. We can fit ourselves into this mold because we really need the money. And then one day we just looked at each other and we were like, no, it was again one of those, like with my daughter, where it's like, I'd rather have the company go down and have the integrity of not working in
Mhm.
a relationship that's so caustic to us. And we are going to do this in every investing choice that we go forward with. And we told the guy no. And then we turned around and gave the same terms to our friends and family. And we
Mm.
raised more money, which was amazing. So friends and family round was really cool. I learned to believe in myself a lot. And then we went to angel investing. And as a woman, I began to realize that I wasn't speaking the same language as the people I was talking to. And I thought at first, like, no big deal. They're used to it. Diversity is like a buzzword, and I'm a woman. This is really neat. And then I realized that I thought about myself and I thought if somebody was asking me for money, I would feel most comfortable if I could understand them. And I thought
Mhm.
about, like, when someone who's homeless on the street asks me for money, what makes me uncomfortable are the differences between us and the things
Mm.
that create friction. It's like, well, I don't understand what they're going to use the money for. And then we ask ourselves all these questions, which in the end are kind of useless. But, when it's a person on the street asking for money, it's not such an ethical question. It's anyway, that's a whole different thing. But I started thinking about it and I realized, like, I am making these people uncomfortable because I am different from them. And I need to learn to speak and act more like a man in order to be able to help them understand what I'm doing. Because as I'm speaking, it's like I'm talking a different language because I'm speaking in my very female mindset and I'm being
Mm.
apologetic and quiet and, kind of taking a back seat. And they see that
Mm.
as me being uncertain and unconfident. And maybe I'm not doing as well as I think I am or something like that. I don't understand my business. And so I started manning up and ultimately realized that I think it's 2% of all investments are given to female founded companies at this point. And there's
Mm.
like a big goal to double that, but that still only puts us at 4%.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a massive hill to climb. So I'm proud of myself for what I've raised, but um, there's a lot of odds. And it's not like it's anyone's direct fault. It's not like anyone's saying, I want to invest in her because she's a woman,
Mhm.
but my female dialect makes me an uncomfortable investment. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that created some interesting decision paradigms as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I'm curious for you, is there any connection between that and you talked at just a few minutes ago about um, kind of focusing on everyone else in the business, but not as much on
Yep,
yourself. And I'm
very
curious
female.
if that's like if there's a connection there.
Oh, yeah, that's a super female trait. Um, and yeah, it's like I'm a mom at home and I come to work and I still am wearing my mom hat, even though I shouldn't be.
Mhm.
I'm taking care of how are you feeling? How are you doing? Are you balancing your work life relationships and da 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 da? And then I look at myself and I'm like, those things are kind of out of whack for me.
Yeah, but again, back to this point of how your business teaches you to grow as a person, right?
Mhm.
It's like you're learning you have learned and you continue to learn a different way of approaching business. And
Mhm.
it's a different way of relating in the world. And I view that all those as skills, and you pull them out when they're appropriate, whether that's in an investment
Mhm.
conversation or at some point a difficult conversation with your kid when they did something they're not supposed to do, right? It's like you build
Yeah.
these skill set, and it goes both ways.
I like that you said that because I think it's extremely true. I've found that like it's like accumulating tools and then you
Mhm.
can pull them out and they are multi-tools. Like I've found that the same things that work in business work with my kids and it's kind of
Yeah.
surprising. We do a lot of like we go to therapy a lot of counseling and we see people to help coach us on our parenting skills because we just want to learn. And then
Yeah.
I take those skills and apply them at work, and I'm like, well, that worked. And then I get business coaching and I apply it at home. It's kind of crazy and really amazing. But yeah, those
That's
things feed
awesome.
each other.
Well, so I'm hoping there's some people who are listening in who have never experienced pit liquor. So just tell us what it is, and I'm going to put the URL here up on the screen. But give us a quick synopsis of what it is and why it's so great.
Okay, so this is pit liquor. It is. I'm trying to center it in the view.
Yeah.
It is natural deodorant that is made from all edible ingredients. And my crazy material scientist husband decided that liquor was the right choice because it's super duper regulated. And so you know all of the ingredients that are in it, you know how they're handled, you know whether pesticides were used, and like the whole life story of the grain. And that means that you can have a product that's super pure and it can actually work. So this solved problems. I have super, super sensitive skin and I react to most deodorants on the planet. Um, but not this because my husband formulated it trying to make sure that it would not irritate armpits. It would actually work. Like he's a perfectionist and it shows. So yeah, pit liquor is pretty awesome. Don't drink it, do use it. And you can get it on our website, pitliquor.com.
And one of the things that I was asking earlier is how much how much of this is a mission driven kind of business for you guys? And I think the little story you shared, and maybe you can share some parts of that here with everyone listening, just as an example of your commitment to creating a quality product that's good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's I didn't realize how standout this way of thinking was until we really got into this business. But we have quality standards that we don't deviate from. And the reason it stands out, I'll give you a little more context. Like in the deodorant industry, there's actually not very much regulation. So
Mm.
during the pandemic, the FDA actually gave big deodorant companies permission to put a poison, like a toxin, into the deodorant called benzene. And benzene is used in the making of bombs. Um, but they said you can put it in as long as it doesn't exceed this amount. And they exceeded that amount, which blows my mind. Because if you read the CDC's regulation on benzene, they say if you have that and it contacts your clothing, you should cut your clothing off instead of pulling it off over your head because it's such a potent carcinogen. And
Mm.
then the FDA is telling these companies that you can go ahead and put that in deodorant as long as it's a small concentration, and they do it. So I find that flooring because I think people think the FDA is protecting them and they think these companies are regulated and they think that there's like some code of ethics, and there isn't. And so we've decided to be a company that writes our own code of ethics, which I know can be kind of Robin Hood and rogue, but we are very strict with ourselves. So we're looking at new packaging right now, as I was sharing with you earlier, and we're looking at metal bottles because glass breaks a lot. It's super pure. Like you can know it's the most pure thing you can package anything in, but it breaks a lot and it's not ideal as we go into wholesale. So we were looking at bottles and found an aluminum container that is in use for food. So people are consuming food from this container every single day. It's like a metal bottle and it's lined with something. So none of the aluminum is leaching in. And we were like, great, then this is a solid container. It's safe, it's healthy. And one of our board members actually was like, why don't you look into what that liner is composed of? And we're like, oh, good call. So we look into it and it's like leaching formaldehyde and some other toxins into what people are eating. And it's a small amount. It's again that like trace amount. So it's considered healthy and it's in the regulations and people are eating it. But that freaked us out. And we were like, no, we can't use that container. Well, it was a 23-cent container, and that's on par with what we currently pay for containers. The other containers we're now looking at are $1.48 because they are made more cleanly. And I think that's
Mhm.
probably the route we're going to go. Because to us, that kind of a compromise, if I had to go to sleep every night knowing, because I would know that I'm poisoning people,
Yeah.
I wouldn't sleep. I would feel horrible and I would feel responsible. And I need to know at the end of the day that I'm looking out for our customers the way I would look out, I guess, for my family, because I am a mom at my core.
Mhm.
And so I care
Yeah.
about everyone that I affect.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And I think that's just it's an inspiring and a great place to wrap up our conversation.
Yeah.
So Erica, if someone wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, beyond going to the pitliquor.com website, what's the best way to do that?
Honestly, my email inbox is a disaster. So the best way is to reach out to customer service. Say you heard about this on Fork in the Road, and Holly will put you in touch with me. She'll actually come knock on my door and be like, "Did you get that email?" And I'll be like, "Thank you." Because my
That
inbox
is a
is very
good tip.
scary.
The
Yep.
best way to get
So
in touch with you.
right to Holly.
Oh, great.
Customer
Well,
service,
Erica,
our customer service line, ask for Erica. You'll get me.
awesome. Well, Erica, thank you so much for being here, for sharing some of your story and really some powerful lessons. So thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was exciting. I appreciate it.